Hi, I'm Garth Gratix. I'm from Blackpool in the north of England and I am the New York City Fellow for Apex Art. Today I'm feeling pretty good. I think there's an element of energy at the end of the journey that's both excited and kind of lingering a bit as to how it will unfold when I get back. Kind of all the thoughts are flowing, good and bad. Lessons learned, some unlearning to do. I think that's kind of a nice reflection point to be at, rather than feel like I've left with absolute clarity or absolute certainty as the experience. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty tired but hopeful in terms of what I might implement as a result. I would describe the Apex Art Fellowship as an unexpected, I guess, re-amalgamation of what you think your mind, body, creativity is doing, and then it slightly unfolds, slightly folds back. There's different tensions as a result of being asked to explore things in unexpected ways. There's elements of discomfort. There's elements of, I guess, finding your own voice as a result of being slightly disrupted. And also some balance for me in my learning, as disruption isn't always generative. So how you find some of your own voice whilst also trusting the process as well. I found that quite interesting. Yeah, having a lot of time to yourself as part of the fellowship is, I guess, parallel to an artist's practice most of the time. There's a solitude and reality to a studio-based practitioner. So it didn't feel too uncomfortable. I think there's elements of it if you are embarking on a journey for a month in a new place that you've never been to before. There's obviously a vast difference in scale here compared to where I've come from, which is a smaller seaside town. And then some of the activities that unravel you slightly emotionally or not, depending on, because you just don't know until you get there sometimes, how you're going to feel. So some of those moments of loneliness or being alone to think through some of that was difficult at times. I think there were some offers throughout the fellowship of people scheduled in to do things with you, and they were good fun, like the improvisation class with Mariam from the team here was quite ridiculous, but for its hilarity it was just good fun, like to really not do what you would do and try and be an actor for an evening, which maybe I'll retire now with that as a goal. And then yeah, some other opportunities to try and either do dance or talks with other people in attendance, and the Washington DC visit and meeting Casey as a former fellow. So I think hearing some from former fellows was quite useful and interesting, because I think as artists we have a natural need to maybe be curious or critical of the things that we're engaging with, and I think we're critical as a result of being curious, which is to just manifest learning rather than tear something apart. So I think I've learned I enjoy having critical debates with people, and sometimes I don't get enough of that in terms of fulfillment when I'm working alone a lot of the time. So yeah, I think that was only some of the reflections of how to build in moments of critical debate alongside the necessary need to be comfortable in your own skin as well, because that is really important. To go away knowing you can absolutely do things on your own is also a necessary thing to reflect on. Even just things personally, like going to bars or restaurants on your own, and just maybe accepting New York culture versus Blackpool culture is, I can sit and eat on my own, and that's very much understood. It's not a thing. No one's seeing you as taking up a seat. It's just part of the everyday. Whereas coming from a family entertainment destination, you'd sit on your own and maybe feel that you're taking up a table. So yeah, it was quite nice to kind of remind myself that I'm comfortable taking up space as I am and deal with it. So that'll be nice to go home with, like, yeah, and what? I'm here as well. I've got to eat. Yeah, I've been meditating a lot on art and class, and I think I've done a few various things over the last 3 to 5 years that might be within leadership or community development alongside artistic practice. And I've kind of come to see some patterns that maybe working class, below poverty, or poor socioeconomic upbringing is more the body of people in that room that are having a conversation around how art can transcend beyond the gallery, beyond the institution, beyond the museum, So I always become quite fascinated in those class disparities as to who the people are on the ground at grassroots level doing the work, and then as a result of that, maybe not also being able to break through any ceiling to then have their work visible, their ideas visible, and I guess their contribution to culture more visible in the way that we, I guess, put people on different platforms. So I'm always curious by that, I'm always concerned by that based on where I come from and my upbringing, when I have an ambition to show and develop my work. And often it can be made to feel like you can only do that through the lens or the eyes or the hands of others, and that you are more of a facilitator. So there's always, I guess, class artist facilitator question mark is always slightly in my mind as to what roles are we playing, and based on whose expectations versus whose dreams, you know. And I'm kind of always interested in how artists are still encouraged to live up to their dreams for themselves as much as give back and support people around them too. And we're not often afforded that if we're in a certain class bracket. To be ambitious for yourself, I suppose, is always a question mark, because there's too many people to help in the world, and of course there is. But I'm not sure anybody in the 1% is being made to feel guilty for not helping them. So that's some of my frustrations when I'm constantly asked to review arts involvement within civic and community work. And I don't necessarily make distinctions as there's one and the other, but how they integrate often turns the artist into the facilitator rather than he's still seen as an artist. So that's just some of my thoughts that I maybe had before here, and I will continue to unravel and explore and play with, because there's no definitive and it's not finite. Mm-hmm. You've just got to find your path, haven't you? I think as a result of the fellowship, some thoughts around community is that there is not a single community in any one context. You know, we're not very good as a society being nuanced in how we explore anything, because we are funded to categorise and evidence and outcomes based on a community of need, and actually it's communities of need, in the same way that we often forget to incorporate artists within any community and we siphon them off as this anomaly that falls through the gaps as a profession, whereas artists are also a community or form communities together that is about support, care, need, social economic support and investment. And also communities in terms of the diversity of communities and the intersectionalities that happen within communities that do come together. Like some of the fellowship activities of just groups coming together to sing. That's formed a community of singers, but that's not their community in how they might live every day. So there's always different types of questions, or inquisition is the wrong word, but being inquisitive around the people in the moments that you're meeting them, and then trying to get a nuanced sense of other impacts, other environments, other spaces, and also other ideologies or ambitions and aims. I think we forget to ask people sometimes what their dreams are versus what their reality is, and often people's realities aren't what they want. They're still striving for something else, and I think it's often more interesting to be generous in the way you ask questions within communities that are about what they want to be, not just what their problems are right now. And I think we're too ingrained in that sometimes. So how I can take some learning back is to maybe rethink some of what my invitations are to broader communities through what I can do, which is run an arts organisation. That's what I'm doing. I'm not going to suddenly add extra layers with the already existing pressure of sustaining that, but how the arts organisation and my role as an artist continues to be collaborative in its invitation to work with different voices, different perspectives, and also materialistically different materials that might mean different symbolisms or cultures to different people. So how I can still bring my experience of communities into my art making is what I will be trying to think through, rather than reassign myself a new role in society, because it's still about how it's applicable to me artistically. Yeah, with ACE, in terms of the homeless charity, as part of the itinerary, I think going to meet them and being someone that's incredibly irritated by the world's segregation of people at the minute, again, marginalised groups, particularly trans and queer people, as is my remit or in my interests and my lived experience. So I'm frustrated by systems that are funded that maybe aren't inclusive or aren't nuanced in the way that they ask questions in what the care and support is needed of individuals. And I think unfortunately, mass-funded things are not about the individual, it's about a broader consensus, therefore it suits mass purpose rather than has any individual nuance around need. And I just don't think there's many examples of things that are doing that very well at the minute, because I worry about censorship. I'm deviating from what you asked me about there, I apologise, and I've lost sense of what my point was. But again, communities in a broader sense, we need better, we don't even need clarity, we just need to stop thinking about clarity as if that's the same for everybody. We need to just be more explorative of what people's needs are and help them achieve dreams. Yeah. My favourite thing about New York has been being expansive. The sheer scale of it invites you to think bigger, be bigger, take up more space. You're not really going to get anything in the vastness of New York unless you either demand it, put yourself out there, and say you're also valued enough to receive it. So there's no kind of, I mean, people aren't not polite, but there's clearly more assertion as to who people are and what they want to get in the world. And I find that really fascinating, and maybe not how I adopt my day-to-day. So how do I go back with a little bit more confidence? There was something that was said, like even within one of the therapy sessions, which have been a useful kind of component, was sometimes you might say what you want in the world and you might get a no. Sometimes you might give a really clear rationale as to what you want and you might get a no. And then also sometimes you can still choose to find your own path as a result of that no, rather than just follow suit. Tips for future fellows. I would say if you are a person that tends to want to know some things in advance, don't arrive without doing your own bit of research. I did that because I thought that was a level of bravery for me, and like, let's just go with it. But if you are a type of personality that needs some kind of awareness of what's in the diary before you come, then do that and gift yourself that and be kind to yourself. I think trust the process, but also challenge any process that you're in. That's no comment on Apex directly, but a broader sense of anything that you embark on as an artist, I'm sure you'll be curious about and investigative of. Do things to a certain level of discomfort and then check in on where it's too uncomfortable for you and communicate that if you feel the need to. The team is willing to listen. And also just use the gaps in the diary to go and explore things in a continued way that is uncertain, unexpected, nuanced, playful. You know, take the time off that you need, but then also if you've got a 3-hour gap, is there another activity that maybe isn't in the itinerary if you feel you've got the energy? Like, can you go and help out doing some other work as a result of the inspiration that the itinerary is giving you? Because there will be other things that you could volunteer to do as well. But that's you checking in on your personal energy levels. And go and do things that are a bit more frivolous and have some frolic whilst you're here. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And if you need to sneak in a bit of art, like sculpture gardens are just in your way sometimes and you have to just walk through them. And that's okay. So you do you, fellows.